Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the conference and specifically to a discussion of healing the front line. I'm Brian Welch. I'm the CEO of Mindful Communications, hosts of the conference, and I'm with my friend Donnie Bedney today, who's the president of PSP Metrics, which is one of the oldest and most historically significant of companies in the world focused on human capital, on making the workplace a more humane and productive environment for people. And so it's a great opportunity to have a discussion of a field where that's been under unprecedented stress for the last couple of years, healthcare, and the means we have as individuals and as organizations to support people on the front lines of healthcare, where both the rewards and the stress of healthcare work are most powerful. Donnie, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Brian. It's a pleasure.
So you've been 15 years in this business of human capital. Can you give me a sense of the front line of the healthcare industry, how it's evolved, how that work has evolved over the last decade or so, and where we're at today for folks working directly with patients?
Absolutely, Brian. So, I will start off by saying, I speak from a position, that I'll be candid, is a little bit jaded because one of the people, and frankly, a few of the people that I love, more than anything, actually work directly in healthcare. My wife is a physician. My brother also happens to be a doc, and then have a number of family members who are nurse practitioners and others that are, have been throughout this time just, heroes, of this black swan event that we are living through right now. God willing, it only happens every 100 years. And so, speaking of frontline, obviously, I'll say some things that folks who are listening to us probably already know, but just increased acuity, across time. There was a lot of both in previous roles as the head of HR for a hospital and some others. It's been so significant, the level of complexity that those frontline individuals are dealing with, and frankly, when you think about it, we know this will align with everything we're talking about today. I don't know if you know this, but loneliness prior to global pandemic was actually trending up in general, right? And one of the things that I found, especially as we talk about frontline health workers today, is that this has been one of the most isolating times that, for a majority of us, because the amount of people who could actually remember the last global pandemic back in 1918, is a very small number of people, right? And so it's just such a stressful, monumental, amount of pressure that our frontline workers within healthcare have been dealing with for now, 2.5 years, or so, and it's tougher than it's ever been.
When you talk about complexity, are you talking about emotional complexity, or has the task complexity been an issue?
I would say it's a blend, my friend, right? So, it's been well documented. Just the at the height of, some of the things that we've been dealing with, especially for folks who've been on, units that have specifically been, dealing with like COVID-19 and otherwise,
Yeah.
uh, folks in ICUs, other like the volume has been extensive. The amount of time to rest and recoup in between shifts for some folks has been significantly diminished. We know that across healthcare, turnover in a lot of our frontline roles have been was high prior to, right? And there are numerous stories of frontline caregivers who um, have reached a breaking point and literally just walked off the floor, right? Have walked out of organizations. Um, and I think one of the pieces that I hear from leaders across healthcare is they're really concerned as to whether or not those people are coming back, and whether or not they're going to be able to kind of fill those needs and roles with people. Are we going to be able to attract more people to this mission filled industry around healthcare, whenever we actually come out of COVID?
So what do you think we need to do for healthcare professionals? In what ways do we need to reconfigure the careers in healthcare to decrease turnover and attract people back into the field?
Yeah, great question. And I will admit that I do not have all the answers, but I think that it's just such a great discussion for us to have. I believe that folks need to be extremely thoughtful about well-being, and the well-being of those caregivers, right? I know we're talking about frontline, and I think a lot of people will assume that frontline means patient facing. But I could also, name a number of folks in non-patient facing roles who, just from talking to clients and others, and even just, close friends who have felt similar pressure, stress, and some guilt, frankly, from not being able to help, as we move some of those non-traditional, non-patient facing roles kind of outside of the hospital. There are people that they love, care about, friends, colleagues, etc., that are in those lines. And so I'd say starting from the basis of something that I believe in healthcare we get arguably more than any industry, which is, let's begin to, look at our caregivers as people. Not as that they're not robots. They are not without emotion. They are not without fatigue. And let us make sure that from an expectations perspective, we're making it okay for people to say, I'm tired. Are we, actually taking a moment to ask people how they're actually feeling, how they're doing? For my time working directly at a hospital, there's a lot of hustle and bustle, right? And so it's very easy, for us to just kind of continue to take care of patients and all of those things, but are we pausing to actually speak directly with our frontline workers and caregivers, and checking in with them, and creating, frankly, just what I'll say is frequent touch bases, directly with the individuals who are managing them, but also even, executive leaders, in their rounding processes and otherwise.
Yeah. Um, Going back for a moment, you mentioned loneliness as a cultural trend that may be having an impact in healthcare.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that a little bit for us and talk about, first of all, why are people lonely? And secondly, how does that affect our performance in the workplace, our job satisfaction?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I'd be interested in understanding that better.
sure, sure. So, one, I think if you think about the fact that we live in an entertainment-based society, right? And I like to say BC and AC, right? So before COVID, after COVID, we spend a lot of time in our day-to-day lives, whatever we do for work, and then entertainment, etc. And so extremely busy times. And one of the, I think, for a long time accepted beliefs is that we as human beings have this ability to compartmentalize and just focus on the task at hand. And I'm not saying that this is completely false, but the rare opportunity and kind of time frame that we're living in now, especially for those who either are remote working or even our frontline healthcare givers who don't have the flexibility of, say, going out to eat necessarily, or going to the movies with friends, or traveling out of the country or across the country to see loved ones. It has become even more isolating for those individuals. The great poet, Michael Jackson, in his song said, I'm looking at that person in the mirror, right? And for the first time, arguably in the past 100 years, folks have been forced to be with themselves, significant others and stuff if you don't live alone, but have been forced to, kind of deal with themselves at home. And it's interesting, and frankly, a little scary, the fact that most people do not have the tools to necessarily deal with some of the emotional, pieces that they're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
If you're being lonely, human touch, right? Once again, we're getting back to being human. If you can't see and touch your friends, your loved ones, and you are alone, let alone coming off of a really stressful shift, how are you unplugging? How are you refreshing and restoring yourself? um, Thinking about my family and some of the people that I love, the most, sometimes just being home with my wife and our 2-year-old can be some of the most regenerating times that I can spend. And if you're able to include my brother and my parents and, other loved ones in there, or even just close friends, right? Those things are critical. But in those times that I can't necessarily or don't have access to those people, what are the tools that I'm able to use and have in order to combat, feelings of loneliness, depression, being emotionally drained. Those are some things that I'm seeing a little bit more.
Yeah. Is the cultural division that pits people on one side or the other of the science, that creates pro-vaccination people and anti-vaccination people, is this also having an impact on the morale and the well-being of healthcare workers?
My hypothesis would be yes. One of the interesting things when I was an administrator at a hospital, um, if you think about it this way, and this is just my opinion, but it's been an interesting transition where, as we entered this time period, um, prior to having any sort of vaccine or boosters or anything, um, we had these people who we lauded as heroes um, at our front lines, healthcare and otherwise, um, low PPE and all in these stressful environments, um, out there
What does
and
PPE stand for, Donnie?
personal protective equipment,
Oh, yeah, of course.
yep,
Thank you.
masks and coverings and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
My apologies for throwing out.
No, it's should have known.
Yes. And so with that, you know, it was amazing. And once again, we kind of lauded, those people and appreciated them, right, for the efforts and everything that they were taking care of us and putting themselves at risk at that point. And, and now we've reached a point um, where some organizations have made vaccinations mandatory in order to be employed.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the kind of tough realities, where folks are potentially saying, well, before it was available, you didn't say I didn't have to come to work when I was putting myself completely at risk without this. But now it's available and you're saying I won't have a job to provide for my family if I don't take it. Um, and so from a perspective, right, I think that once again, going back to the fact that I I think we need to be very cognizant that we are human, and that people have very unique perspectives, that they can make choices, based on their own bodies. And to answer your question, in the best way I can, I believe that can lead to division, because we don't take the time to ask folks, well, why do you not want to receive a vaccination? If it's not a medical reason or anything else, can we just talk about what it is? And on the other side, I've heard some folks who are kind of like pro-vaccination say, well, we're in healthcare, we believe in science, right? Why wouldn't you do it? But I believe that there's something kind of somewhere in the middle, and obviously this isn't going to be an exact answer for all organizations, but I do remember back in the day when with the flu vaccine, and I think it's a little bit easier in healthcare. You had your badge, you get a sticker if you got the flu vaccine, you get a sticker if you didn't. And if you were around patients who, in general, you'd wear a mask if you didn't have it. And if you did, then you weren't required to wear a mask, although, in those typical departments. So it's a tricky situation, but I think it's turned out to be a little bit more divisive. And, let's not even, it would take us a whole nother meeting to talk about, the way it's been politicized and,
Oh, yeah.
Everything else, and I think that's really weighed on the discussion and kind of caused people to, draw up lines a little bit more than, what they normally do. Because
Yeah.
once in healthcare, right, we come together all the time, for the good of our patients. And I think that our frontline healthcare workers have done that for us for years, and definitely, just been once again some of our heroes over the past couple of years.
Yeah. Even more specifically, do you find that healthcare workers they are trying to save lives, they're using science to save lives, and there's a popular dialogue that discredits that? Is there a morale issue in the fact that the airwaves are full of, a line of reasoning that basically discredits the product that the healthcare workers are delivering?
Oof. Yeah, we're going to a deep place, my friend. I think yes. It's a perfect storm for divisiveness for sure. We could speak about some misinformation, perceptions, etc. But one of the things I think, especially as we think about, how media or social media or anything else has kind of been involved at, let's just say, the distribution of information. How about that? I think that folks have we live in a time where, in a great way, folks can you can research and arguably learn whatever you want to learn, right? Google is an amazing thing, and it's a luxury that our grandparents and ancestors didn't necessarily have the luxury of, right? And I don't know if you remember having to go to the encyclopedia to look up things, right? Or card catalogs in the library. So yeah, I got the gray hair to prove.
Do I remember? You're asking if I remember?
So I think that there's so much information at our fingertips, and at times it's challenging to really decipher what information, what is the truth, right? And once again, as kind of lines are drawn, people tend to kind of choose extremes. And my personal belief is that the truth tends to lie somewhere in the middle, um, on a lot of those, because if there are only two choices, then do you really have a choice?
Yeah, and I really wasn't trying to draw you into a conversation about misinformation or about the nature of the public conflict. I was more interested in what's it like to be a frontline healthcare worker,
Mm.
treating unvaccinated people who are
Yeah. I,
actively hostile to the product that you're there to deliver. It's a tricky emotional situation for the healthcare worker. That was what
really,
was,
yeah,
yeah.
I completely agree, man. I'd say that, just the people that I'm connected to who still, provide care in healthcare, um, especially the ones, I think it's a really conflicting thing, to um, be taking care of an individual who is suffering, living up to your to the oaths that you have taken to take care of folks, um, who are in front of you and suffering, um, based on a decision that they actually have the power to make,
Yeah.
and then based on that decision, you were then having to take care of them in that time. And once again, I think the great thing about healthcare is that, um, a lot of healthcare workers, have this empathy and level of empathy, for people, that potentially supersedes, a lot of other industries, where regardless of individuals' kind of personal rights and decisions, they understand their role is to do everything that they can, to help this person, to save this life,
Mm.
to make sure that they get home to their loved ones. And that is something, blessings to them, because it's something that I'd probably struggle with a
Mm.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge thing.
Yeah.
So in these unprecedented times, what should managers and administrators and healthcare organizations be doing to take care of their frontline workers? what are you seeing out there that are measures that make a difference, that help people in effective ways?
Yeah. I think that folks are being more thoughtful about the tools and resources that they're providing. They're moving beyond, your traditional kind of helplines, right? Here's this pamphlet. If you're feeling some kind of way, call this person you don't know. I'm seeing a rise in uh, efforts around wellness, being able to provide folks with access to, there's any number of apps to, help you from a meditation perspective, right? A mindful perspective, pun intended. Um, and that's been great. I've also seen, some organizations who also have literally, been building and kind of creating, like wellness areas directly within, their hospitals or healthcare systems, right? And so, that way they can kind of take care of folks, prior to shift or after shift,
Yeah.
as opposed to, giving folks resources which you hope that they, take um, advantage of when they're get home. And so I think that that is something that I've been extremely impressed, with. Know that it's not always feasible, but I do believe that finding a time, both before shift, to kind of center, be present, work through, potential emotions and stuff that you're potentially dealing with, because you're going to have to hit the ground running, when you start. Um, if hospitals and healthcare organizations can help their frontline workers do that and become present and not go from all of the other things that you're dealing with in life, which, quick side note, Brian, going back to um, that looking yourself in the mirror and compartmentalizing, I think that it has become more and more clear during this time, right? That people, and once again, healthcare workers are probably better at this than otherwise. If you're dealing with, some sort of dysfunction at home, or a loved one or is sick or dealing with something, and then you're driving in, to work wherever you are, and somebody, causes you to swerve and you almost, swerve off the road or anything, to go from all of those emotions and thoughts about, other people and things that are going on, right? In the US specifically, a significant amount of social unrest that we were experiencing for a while, right? To take all of those things and expect that these folks then will lock in and just take care of patients without having a ton of noise, I think is a belief that it is turning out to pretty much be a myth. And we're understanding that we're actually the same person all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I think that in and of itself, if folks don't necessarily take anything from what we talk about today, understanding that finding ways to connect with your frontline workers, because they are the same, and providing them support in all aspects of their life, because holistically they're the same person. If they're dealing with, if we can help them deal with and kind of put them in states where their overall well-being, not just thinking through health from the perspective of a pedometer, right? And whether or not they're exercising, whether or not they're eating the right food, but literally being able to help them feel the emotions that they are feeling, that it's okay to feel that, 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 that but also that there are some solutions, and that we can provide things from counselors and all of those. But just what are those coping mechanisms that we can help them learn, that we can provide for them? Because one of the sayings that I also think is really powerful is that you're only as strong as your coping mechanisms, right? So hence one of the reasons I've been just so impressed with your organization and the work that you all do, because I do truly believe we are only as strong as our coping mechanisms, and if healthcare organizations can understand that point, understand that people are the exact same regardless of environment, they're the same human, and we can provide those tools for them, I think that we'll be able to see significant increases in overall well-being. I believe that folks will be retained, like the amazing talent that we have within healthcare. I also think that that'll lead to the organizations that really get this right, that will lead to more referrals, right? I think recruiting future talent, will be improved as a result of that. And not even to go into the numerous outcomes that we all are measured on as leaders. I believe we'll see significant improvement there as well.
Speaking of those leaders, I mean, does all of this change the role of the manager in organizations? Are there, is the definition of what a manager was doing 10 years ago, has that changed, do you think?
I don't think fundamentally it's changed, Brian. I think that some folks are seeing the light about how important that frontline manager to frontline employee relationship is, and how critical it is.
Uh-huh.
And folks are understanding that it's one of the strongest connections that we probably haven't been as intentional about, because of the Peter principle, frankly. So if you think about frontline workers, healthcare at times, there are a number of organizations that it's kind of a conundrum, right? So you take someone who's amazing at the bedside, and their reward is that you make them a manager, right? And if they are a good manager, then they evolve into another role. And so you're taking some of your most talented people at the bedside and moving them farther and farther away from the patient.
Yeah.
Which simultaneously, depending on those people that you're selecting, may also be disengaging for the individuals that they begin managing, because that's not their passion, that's not necessarily their natural talent and ability. But we also haven't created compensation structures or even tools from an evaluation perspective to identify folks who would be great in those roles. We just take our top performers and continue to move them throughout. So that's probably still a question that exists. As you talk about 10 years, that is something that
probably was the same issue 10 years ago, though. Not that it's changed in a major way.
No.
But what about your wife and your brother? What are they talking about from their workplace these days? What's their experience of working in healthcare on a day-to-day basis these days?
Great question. I don't know if they'll see this recording, so I'll be careful about what I say for both of them. But I think that they would echo, one, the fact that folks have come together in just a rare way not that it wasn't happening before, but that um, themselves, their colleagues, the care teams that they serve on, they just really, really care about people, man. The hours and extra shifts that I know my brother and my wife have taken on, throughout this time. The measures that they take when they get home in order to protect their families, as well has been significant. They're both extremely optimistic that things are getting better. They're optimistic that the people and organizations that they work with and for will continue to try and figure things out.
Mm.
And ultimately, they are both still very committed to remaining in healthcare, because it is something that they both have a significant passion for, that they've wanted to do for majority of their life. And even during this extreme time, um, one thing I can say that has been very critical for our house is that my wife has been extremely intentional, more than any time in our marriage, about her well-being.
Mm.
And so, and we have worked together, kind of on that, and made some really holistic changes around what we eat, our exercise. She's been very intentional about relaxation, meditation, simple things like taking baths, right? Like just, literally slowing down from a time perspective when she is not at work. And I've seen a significant difference from her at the beginning of this time
Yeah.
to what she's kind of grown and matured into. Once again, just over 2 years into this thing.
Mm. Mm. That's a cool story. Is there an aspect of this topic that we haven't examined that you think we should, Donnie? Anything else that we should talk about that maybe we've skipped over today?
Well, one thing that I think is important, Brian, and I'll say it this way. The time that we're living in is one that folks have not experienced. Um, and from talking to some of my clients, um, July of 2020 or so, and probably between July and September, I remember speaking with one of them, and I had been studying a little bit more about 1918 and all that kind of stuff, and black swan events in general. And I shared with him, I said, I think that one of the unique things about the time we live in is that if you consider it a black swan, then the level of innovation, the speed of change, all of those things are accelerated during these moments. And he said, Donnie, you're absolutely right. We have become more integrated and gotten more done as a health system in the past 3 to 5 months. And he'd been at this health system for a long time. He said, and traditionally this would have taken 3 to 5 years to pull off. And so I am very adamant, and hopefully those who listen are motivated and inspired by some of the things that we've shared today. But I think it's so critical for us to remain vigilant and to move away from simply being thought leaders. And I'll define what I mean by this in healthcare, and that we continue to move towards becoming futurist. And by thought leader, I believe that prior to this time, I think in healthcare, we were really, really good at knowing what used to be true and just enough about what currently is going on to be dangerous.
Mm.
But I think that we need to shift to futurist where we are very, very clear about what is currently going on in our environment, in our world, with our frontline employees, etc. Right? Um, unless you have a time machine, we're not going back to anything. But we are here, and all we have is what's in front of us. And we are in a rare time where, once again, you talk about cultural change, you talk about wanting, the need to innovate. Um, Remote working is a great example of that. I was told by numerous clients and colleagues that remote working wouldn't work in healthcare. And I had clients who stood up hundreds, if not thousands, of people working from home within a week's time of everything shutting down. Right. And a lot of those folks are never coming back to, a hospital or health system. And so I encourage you all, friends, be vigilant within the organizations that you are. Let's continue to, come together. Let us continue to, be very clear about what is currently going on, and let's continue to push our industry towards the future where we should go and how we should continue to help our frontline workers heal. I think this is the opportunity to accelerate some changes that, by 2030, we're going to be looking at a completely transformed industry, and that's really exciting to me.
That's a powerful and important perspective, Donnie, and thank you so much for joining us here for the Healing Healthcare Conference. It's been great getting to know you and great to be with you, and thank you all for joining us for Mindful Communications. I'm Brian Welch, and I hope we'll see you again.
Thank you.